So QBO Plus supports passing through time, expense, material to an invoice. We'll look at that. I'll do that. We'll talk about sub-customers, and then two-sided items. That's my sleeper hit, like my favorite sleeper hit for QBO Plus over Essentials, right? You need an item to hit two sides, revenue and COGS. And that's where Plus comes into play. You'll probably call it double-sided items in the desktop, right? So I can align with you there. I will run a P&L by customer because that's a canned report and show you some filtering there as well as a budget to actual report, etc. But let's go in and just look at some of the key stuff, right? There's my little background scene. I am in the client file, right? Cloud Collaboration LLC from QBOA. Okay. And then under the gear icon, which is going to be all your operational things, we're going to go to account and settings. So let's first go through the key settings that will make some of these fields available for a profitability report as well as passing stuff through. So first I go to the expenses setting on the left and just click into, you can click the pencil icon, but you don't have to. Just left click into the area that you want to impact. And you'll see show items table on expense and purchase forms, right? So this is the big reason why you need Plus, right? Because much like if I can liken it to a check or a credit card charge in QuickBooks Pro or Premier, you know how you have the expenses tab and the items tab. So this is essentially doing that. It's opening up, so you have the account details tab and the items detail tab, and we'll create a couple of these, like a bill and expense I think I have on my list just so you can see. But you can probably already visualize it in your mind. This opens up the items table, so you can have two-sided items, which we'll look at next after these settings. Track expenses and items by customer, right? That just puts the customer field, or if you choose maybe the Stacy Kildall method, and I'll make sure I put a video on that in the chat, where you use a sub-customer method. Right, so it's like that parent-child relationship, customer colon job, same kind of thing, customer, sub-customer. That turns that ability on, or where you would be able to, I mean, it's already in the customer list, but it allows the customer field on cost transactions to pass through. And then do you want to make things billable? Right. So these three you want to check off if you're doing like a light job costing up to this point where you might not need Knowify at this point, right? But you'll see where you do, right? The other one is if you go to the advanced setting, and scroll down to time tracking. Now this would be available in Essentials and Plus. We recently rolled in time tracking to Essentials. No, there's no extra time tracking users. That would still be Plus only. You know, that user that doesn't count against the user list for your clients, like report only user, there's time tracking only, that's Plus. But Essentials can do a single time activity, weekly timesheet, and then this allows me to, you know, make it billable and pass through to an invoice, or at least tag the time to a customer. However, and Terrin can probably go over this more, but one thing I love about the Knowify app, and then I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but time in QuickBooks is, even in desktop, is only non-posting until you put it on a posting transaction, right? So you can't really see the cost of that time to the business. Knowify gives you that as soon as you enter the time, right? You don't have to wait to put it on a bill or a check or a paycheck. Now, one of the big gaps in QBO with the payroll is you can't assign a job to it, a customer, right? So you're journal entering that in. So again, there's these things, and you'll see the gaps where Knowify really comes into play right now at the current state of QuickBooks Online, right? But those are the key settings to turn on. Now the next thing I'd like to do is go to the sales in the left-hand panel, and we'll go to customers. We'll look at the customer record first, and then, because I already set up a job for this. This is monthly bookkeeping and reporting, so it's like a consulting file. That's the business, right? So this is a sub-customer, and notice the key thing here is when you edit the sub-customer, if you're going to use this sub-customer method, is to create the job and then check off the box that it's a sub-customer of, and you get your customer list, so the folk shop, and I'm actually doing monthly bookkeeping and reports, but I want to bill with parent. If I choose to bill with this customer, you know, I could have some invoices, but if the parent sends in the payment, I won't see the invoice when I go to the customer payment window, right? So in most cases that I've seen, 90+% of the cases, maybe more like 95, you're going to bill with parent. So you could have, you know, this main customer with a bunch of sub-customers under it, which represent the jobs or the work that you're doing, the services you're providing for the particular customer, and then bill with parent. So when the invoices come in and the payment comes in from the main entity, you'll see all the invoices there. So a couple key settings that are important. The sub-customer one, bill with parent, right? And then it's going to just be like in desktop in the customer center where you have the parent as well as the child or the customer and the quote-unquote job. Right? It would look that way on reports too and on transactions as well. Now, let's go back to sales. You probably have noticed the updated left-hand panel for your clients, right, where we're trying to consolidate like areas together so I can go right to products and services, because the other big piece of this, besides those key settings, the sub-customer method, as well as two-sided items, right? So I'm doing some accounting consulting. Click Edit, just so you can see. When you set up your service or non-inventory part item, because just like with desktop, if you're bringing inventory items out to the job, it's not going to debit COGS till you sell that particular inventory part. So most will use non-inventory items, right, as materials, because you can see the COGS as soon as you create the expense form for them. Right? It's going to debit expense, debit a COGS, and credit AP or credit the asset account, whatever. So what's nice about Plus is when I create a service or non-inventory part item, I can check off the sales info. They're just kind of flip-flop versus desktop. So I have, because desktop has purchase section on the left and sales section on the right. So I have the sales up here for this revenue account, but I also have the purchase info, right, to outside consultants. That's my 1099 COGS account that I use. Right, so I can use this item on both cost as well as revenue forms. And that's what allows me also to push things through to a customer on an invoice if I want, etc. Again, this box I liken to the one in desktop that says, the sentence is not always so clear, but is used by subcontractors or in assemblies. You probably recognize that, and opens up the purchase side. So double-sided items, two-sided items, whatever you actually call it, that's supported in Plus. And you know, if I create a new item and go to non-inventory, you'd see the option too, right? Create your item, there's the purchase info. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So I have some set up. Now, what Knowify does is they're going to build out the estimate to actual for the job immediately, right? And you see that on their dashboard, and Terrin will show you. In QuickBooks Online, since there's just a few reports that impact real job costing, there's no real estimate to actual, right? I have estimates by job and stuff, but I have no true estimate to actual report, and there's no progress invoicing either, which also Knowify does. So again, these things that, you know, I'm sure some of the stuff's on the roadmap, but I always go to the expert app, right? Because that's what they focus on totally, and let QBO be the accounting, you know, the foundation, you know, where the data goes over. But if I do go to, actually, let me show you this. You can do a budget to actual, but it requires, so if you go to the gear icon budget, I want to show you a budget I've created on monthly bookkeeping and reports. I'm going to edit it. You would create a budget, and you can create a budget by job. So notice, there's the folk shop, parent, customer, colon, and then I got the sub-customer, right? So parent, child, parent, customer job relationship, excuse me. So I have, you know, and you have to look at the estimate that I created, and I'll show you the estimate, but I use the estimate to then create, fill in the data of where these amounts are in the accounts. And this is going to be my budget for the job for this year. And I did show rows as accounts, and I'm looking at the total of the year. You could do a budget by month, by quarter, whatever, but I'm doing it by the particular job for the year to put in the total amounts, right? But it requires several other windows. I have to know what accounts the items are linked to that I have in the estimate. I have to have the estimate open. It takes quite a while, an investment of time to build out a budget, and I've only done like six entries. I mean, you might have 20, 25, and that could take an hour, 45 minutes, or whatever, just to get like the budget overview. But it is a workaround to get that estimate to actual, whereas Knowify will do it instantaneously when you just create the estimate, right? Anyway, I'm going to click in the search field to bring up the place where I started for this job. Even before I did the budget, this was my contract, right? And it was accepted, and I'm going to start working on it, and it's due by, you know, the 25th of August, and it's accounting consulting, a speaking fee, and I'm also doing some tax prep, right? 8 hours, 1-1. And there's no, I can copy to an invoice, which I'll do at the end, but let's go book some expenses against the job so you can at least see that and see how it passes through. However, you know, there's no progress invoicing, right? And I think that's what's the critically you're going to need, particularly for your residential contractors, all right? And Knowify would solve that. So I have my estimated amount, and this is what the you know, the budget to actual is based on. So I have the estimate for those amounts. So when I go to reports, and I can't do a P&L yet by customer, I got to enter some data, which we're going to do now, so you can see that workflow. But if I go to budget to actual report, it'll just show the budgeted and no actuals yet, but we'll come back to this. And you can customize these reports, right? And I'm going to filter by customer. Remember, I have that estimate, and just choose the folk shop. And here's the monthly bookkeeping, right? We're going to run this. So here is my budget to actual monthly booking reports for the folk shop, right? And obviously it has just the budgeted amount, and it will show the over-under, right? So I can do the percent of budget, et cetera. But let's get some data in there so it looks, you know, I can really see the actual of it as well. So, and then the total for the folk shop. So there's that, as well as the budget overview report. Once you're creating that, can be helpful as well, because I can just see my budget overview for monthly bookkeeping reports. And I can set a default date range for these to open, etc. Yeah, Jason, project is great. I'm going to show at the end because it's in beta. You know, it does, and you will see where it makes it easier, but I'll get there. I just, by design, I wanted to wait to the end to show how you can turn projects on and what you track it in that project center, but still in beta, so I didn't want to start with that as it's not fully rolled into QBO itself. But yeah, definitely. The projects do give you a project center, which is helpful. So I'm going to go, but thanks for reminding me. But I have this all in the design, and if it turns out it backfires, you guys wanted projects first, then got it, going ahead, but taking the gamble. So just on these fundamentals of the job costing. All right, so I have my budget, and let's go enter some data. I have the estimate, but now I want to do some data regarding this project. So, you know, I can do an expense. You know, say it was a credit card expense for a particular account. And this will be that the 1099 account. Let's see if it pulls up there. And we'll say so far I've done, you know, $400 to pay them. Here's where I choose a customer. That's what that setting does. So I can quickly type in here and choose this. Now, here's the thing. You can make it billable, but if I'm just wanting to do a P&L by customer, then I would uncheck it, right? Do I want it to go to an invoice? Am I just kind of creating an invoice from an estimate? Then I would not actually make it billable. So the same as desktop goes, you know, if you're going estimate to the invoice directly, and again, it's all or nothing, it's not progress billing yet, then I would leave it unbillable. But if you're just like doing a bunch of services and you're creating expense or a check or a bill and you want it to go through to an invoice, so you don't have an estimate in this case, then you would make it billable. And it would open up in the drawer. I'm going to leave it unbillable for this time. And again, this item details, right? This is where I could put, you know, to match the item that's on the actual estimate, right? And I could say we did like 4 of the hours right now, and then I'm going to tag my customer. So the item details, like that items tab that you're used to in desktop doing this, right? Expenses items, the account details, item details, and that's what it does there. So I'll click, I know I hit it both, you would just hit the item, just want to show you where the customer field is. You guys can take it from there, so I'm going to say we did a check, and then, you know, save and close. I could use a check form. Same thing on a bill, right? If you go to a bill and enter the bill, it'll be the same thing. Particularly, maybe you just grab some stuff for Amazon for materials or a purchase order that you're going to bring over, and you can tag the customer as well. And make it billable. I'll make this one billable just so we can see when the invoice opens up, you can see the drawer. So you don't forget anything. So I'm doing the expenses as it's going along. And then if I go to the original estimate, oh, time too. Sorry, let me do some time. Single time activity or weekly timesheet, right? But again, this is going to be non-posting until I actually put it on, you know, the actual check or a bill, right? And with the payroll, this is the tough one, is that you can't really track labor burden inside of QBO Plus. So again, I can do the accounting consulting again, and we'll say it was 3 hours, you know, and I can make it billable if I want, click save and close, but even this would not show up on any kind of posting report at all till I put it on a check or a bill or whatever. So, but that's how you would pass it through. If you want to make it billable, you check the box, or if I want to tag it, but it's just critical to know time's not posting until you put it on a posting transaction. So if I go back to the original estimate, here we go, and I can copy the invoice. We'll say we've done it. Still not a huge amount of visibility. I can look at that budget to actual report, but not a lot of estimate to actual or huge amount of visibility of what's going on outside of the transactions, the customer list, and the budget to actual report. But here in the drawers where it would open up anything that I made billable, right? So I have this billable expense, and then I also have the billable time that I want to add, and then so there was a change order, which we also don't track. You notice that the amount is now $1,000 more than what I think I had was $3,400 to start. So again, tracking change orders, again, is going to be with Knowify. But when I click Save and Close, I have that. Now let's go to a report. And now we should be able to see a couple reports here, profit and loss by customer. And I'm going to customize it by clicking on Customize, Filter, and then I'll just go down to Folk Shop, monthly bookkeeping, this month to date. So I have some monthly bookkeeping, and the net income is $3633.88. So pretty good. So I can see that based on the actual and then the revenue that I made from the job, right? Total income there, and then the cost to me. As well as if I duplicate the tabs, again, if you need to have the multiple windows, quote unquote, just duplicate the tab. It's going to bring up another P&L by customer, which you can then save your customizations, right? And I can even share these with, well, we'll go over the firm-based identity and firm only. Soon you'll see that when you're in your client files. That's not really part of today, but look for this. You could actually customize and save reports that are just for those QBOA team members in the firm. And then, or, all people that would have access to a P&L, basically company admin or the all user. So I could share it or add it to a group and even auto-send to someone that's not even part of the QBO, but they just want to see the profitability by this particular job. So that's all available as well. But now I'm going to go to Reports, Business Overview. That's where you'll find your budget overview as well as a budget to actual. So go back to the budget to actual, and then I'll customize it again. Again, saving these reports would be a lot easier. I can just go to my custom reports and bring it up from a click as opposed to scrolling through. But I like to hammer down the customization. Pretty easy. Click Customize, click on Filter, which is the same language that desktop would have, and then choose your particular customer and run the report. And it would show now the monthly bookkeeping and reports, my actual, my budget, my over, percent of budget, and then the total for that customer. And then I could go ahead and save the customization, etc. So now, what Jason's talking about, great segue before we head into Knowify, is project tracking. That is something you'll find in QuickBooks Labs. And what that's going to allow us to do is just create this project center and autofill like the sub-customer or project name that you can attach to either a customer or sub-customer. You probably use it in lieu or in place of sub-customers. You turn it on in Labs. And I'm sure we'll roll it in eventually, but right now it's like a beta playground. So gear icon, QuickBooks Labs. And then you'll see this new one here called Track Your Projects, right? And it basically creates a projects center within the left-hand panel of the QuickBooks Online file. Just click Done, and then you'll see projects. You don't even have to refresh if for some reason it doesn't. When these labs are turned on, they don't show. Just click the Reload Page button, right? But typically it just shows, and here's projects. What projects allows me to do is it's one center where I can just keep everything together. So if I wanted to, like from one place, like monthly, bookkeeping and reporting, or reconciliation, you choose your customer, and let's say it's this 1601 customer, put in any notes, and it's really just a project. And it's going to bring me to a project center, right? Where we are going to look at transactions linked to it, project profitability, which brings me to the profit and loss by customer, right, without having to create it. So to Jason's point, it's a lot easier to get there. You don't have to really filter there because they're canned. Now the budget versus actual is not in play here because, again, this project is assuming there's no estimate to actual, right? And that's where Knowify is going to come into play, just one of the things they do. But I can still see a P&L. This will take me right to that P&L by customer I had if I'd use project first. And it'll show me also unbilled time and expense and non-billable time, as well as I can add all these transactions. Start with the estimate. I can add an expense, a bill, a time, a PO, but again, a PO is non-posting like time, so I have to push it to a posting transaction like a bill or an expense or a check. And then invoice or invoice payment, then I look at the profitability. And you'd see your list of transactions. Now, just to show you something I already have canned, I'm going to go into a client file here, in another Chrome user, right? Chrome's great for this. And I'm going to go to projects, and you'll see it's a pet boarding supply. So they have a bunch of stuff in progress, right? So where I can see my transaction list, for the project. Actually, let me look at one that already has some transactions there. We'll look at the completed one. So click on transaction list, and you'll be able to see all the transactions that are linked to that job. The nice thing is when you go to like the expense, it'll pre-fill the name of it'll be customer : project, if you will. So it'll pre-fill it for you on a form, which is nice. If you enter a transaction from that particular project detail window, like if I go here and click a bill, let's just say we're doing another transaction for this project, and choose what it was for this. Again, I'm not going to add that to the bill, but when I choose the account, notice, see, the customer / project field fills out automatically with it automatically a billable status. Now, keep in mind there, billable means it's going to want to go to an invoice. Your customer might have already accepted the contract, so you're not actually going to make it billable. So before you save and close this, you want to go ahead and uncheck that box. But I love how the project and the customer, which is really a customer : job, customer : project, is pre-filled into that particular field. So that'll be helpful, one less field you have to do. And then you click project profitability. It's going to bring you right to the P&L for this particular project, way faster than having to filter it. All right, so, I mean, if your clients are service industry clients and they don't yet need, let me go back to the deck and then I'll hand it over to Terrin. They don't yet need, these things here. There we go, budget to actual, we talked about that, projects, right? Okay, so estimate to actual reporting, progress invoicing, change orders, labor burden by job, A1A billing, again, tracking that payroll labor burden. If they don't need that, then they can use the light job costing and actually turn projects on right now. Maybe just a small service industry client or whatever, or they just want to track their projects in a center and tag things to it and either pass it to an invoice or not. All that is supported. But this is the feature gaps that are not. So it's 10:27 my time, just to give Terrin a little extra time. This is what Knowify will focus on and allow you to do without having to create, a workaround and create that budget, etc., which it really requires a super rigid mind, just kind of QBO on its own to fulfill some of these gaps, right? And the only way I can figure out labor burden is journal entry, $0 journal entry or $0 check, but that's still only going to impact the job and not necessarily the item. So, Terrin, if you want to unmute yourself, I'll hand it over to you, and I'll keep an eye on the questions. I'm going to make you presenter.
All right, cool. Thank you.
And then you should be presenter right now and kind of show all the stuff where QBO is just not going to be able to support. So I appreciate it.
Cool. And so just from my understanding, is this working? Do you see 56%?
Yeah, I see that, 56%. Yep, totally.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks again. I'm actually happy I got to see a lot of that stuff. That's neat. I'm always happy to learn more about QBO and kind of what type of stuff is an option in there. But like you said, a lot of what you covered, we kind of have ways to accomplish similar stuff, only less of a workaround and more kind of our inherent features and what we're built to do. Mainly, tracking that budget versus actual cost on any jobs that we have in our system. But I'm just kind of kicking us off on this dashboard. I know Woody had mentioned this briefly, but just to kind of give you guys some more information on the real-time data that we're giving, our customers using Knowify. Average profitability, this number is really just running based off of the profitability of all the different jobs in your account. We're saying, based off of what we have in your system, you generally look at a 56% profitability on any of your jobs. We can see how many of those aren't profitable, ones that are above the average profitability, how many are below, how many we just don't have enough info on. But the real, I like to think the real benefit of this screen are these other numbers we're showing you, where I have 13 active jobs or contracts, and within those contracts, I have in my company $125,000 worth of open contracts that have not been billed to the client yet. So this is kind of my future income that's going to be eventually invoiced that I haven't gotten around to. Maybe I'm not far along on the project yet. I can also see how many outstanding bids, and this actually includes change orders as well that haven't been approved from clients yet, but I may be moving this value from opportunity value into unbilled when approved by clients. We also give you a quick snapshot at how much is outstanding in your invoices and bills right now. Obviously, we always want to see a little bit more here than here, but neither of them should be outstanding for too long. We want to make sure we get all of this paid up as fast as possible. But this is just a way of giving the end user just a broad overview of how things are going in their account. We're going to drill down into our contract jobs section. And this is kind of, this contract jobs module, and we're a module-based system that you see, you navigate down the left-hand side just like QuickBooks, but this is kind of what makes Knowify Knowify. We have ways that whenever you enter information into our system, and you enter it through things like your time tracker for hours, purchases, bills from vendors, invoices that you're sending to your client. It always tags to these jobs. They kind of stand as files so we can run reports and get this real-time data. And you can see that we're showing you a profitability statement on any of these jobs at any point in time. And it's broken down into revenue, both billed and paid. We give you a real-time work in progress number. This is based off of your actual versus your estimated or versus your budgeted. And we use that times your contract value. We take out how much has been invoiced so far. And so it's all just updating in real time as each item is purchased, as each person checks out of the job site or gets their hours entered, as you log bills from the subcontractor. And so it all just kind of updates while you go through the natural flow of the project. I'm going to show you a couple of the features that we support in Knowify just to give you some more info. And I set up a project here, Woody's Mansion Construction. We're building in my house today. And I'll open up this project. And so in the same way that contract jobs is kind of like a file database for all of your job costs to see it into each job, this is where we really start drilling down and getting a little bit more detailed than most other systems and things that are available in QuickBooks as of right now. Because within each of these job files, we have phases. And you'll see that these are actually tied into your service items. That's what this little catalog icon is for. This is actually using these services and products from your QuickBooks Online account. So that way when we push them in on invoices, and we can do it on the expense side too, you can actually use those two-way items that Woody was talking about. So I can use these as phase names. They're also going to be handy for running reports in Knowify as well. But for each phase of the job, we have a materials budget and we have a labor budget. And so we can manage both sides of this. It's not just generic budget for demolition, for painting. It can be broken down into specifically materials, labor. We can manage subs as well. If they're 1099s, we manage them as labor. They track their time. They can have mobile access, and we'll see how much they cost you hourly. We can also break down budgets into more detailed info. So like here's my materials budget, but it's actually broken down into paint, into brushes, into tape. And this is really helpful for the end user, for your companies that are using Knowify, because their materials budget can actually be more accurate this way. And it's a dynamic piece of our system that we can actually use the budget to place orders, send them directly to vendors. You can reconcile bills against the POs. I'll try to cover that at some point here. But it's just a way to get a little bit more automation out of this. We can also get you budget versus actual in hours too. So if I want to say like we're going to have a foreman on site for 40 hours and I'm going to have laborers there, my laborer cost is crazy offset because I put someone in at $1,000 an hour. His name is Tony Stark. But basically this is my way of getting not just actual versus estimated cost, but also actual versus estimated hours. This is really valuable information for contractors, especially while they're doing their budgeting. And then just to show you another option that we've set up in the system, this is just one of Knowify's neat tools that we've built for contractors. You can actually automate this process by using what we call a service template. On the QuickBooks side, it just syncs up with a service in your account. But you can also build this to prompt you for the size of a job site, like in square feet, where I could say like it's 1,000 square feet, confirm, and it'll automatically build a labor and material budget for you using that information. That way it has not just, this is how much we're going to spend on labor and materials, but the detailed list of things they're going to need to order, the hours they're going to need. They kind of just speeds up the process for the end user who's putting together these proposals or budgets in this situation. Now, what we also do, yeah.
I did have an audience question, if that's okay. what happens when a job carries over 2 fiscal years? Are you able to see like the actual for both fiscal years against the budget in one report?
You know, as of right now, the reporting is really per job. It's not broken down into years, but we do allow for Excel exports of this data with dates tied to every single item, whether it be a purchase or a bill, a time entry, an invoice to the client. So you can actually use Excel to parse that information and still get the data out of our system. You know, anything that we don't have a built-in report for, best chances are we have an Excel export that we can give you to get the information that you're looking for.
Nice, thanks.
And so when we have the budget, we can actually use that information to create a proposal. And actually, I'm doing this in owner contract. I'm going to switch this up and show you guys how our AIA works, because this was another thing that's mentioned. It's a big selling point on Knowify for a lot of contractors, since AIA is a pain point for anyone who needs to do a lot of this work. And so when I create the bid, basically we give them the option to use their budget to actually get more information across when they're sending out the bid. You know, the client doesn't need to see what their budget is, but this way they can basically say, I'm going to plug in a markup, and it'll quote the prices for them, so they don't need to kind of give their best guess at what they should quote to see the margins they want. We'll actually just build a proposal document using their estimated cost plus a markup. And here's just one of our stock proposals. We do customization very similarly to QuickBooks Online. We can actually mimic their same document style for people who need to see it. And then aside from being able to generate these documents, we actually have a digital e-signature where the client can sign off on these items. You know, we keep their information in with the client because the client database is syncing up with QuickBooks. So since I had Woody in my QuickBooks database, it pulled him in here and with his email address as well. So all I have to do is send this. I'm going to go ahead and send it to myself as well, just so you guys can see what this is going to look like on the client's end. But basically, it marks it in my system as out for signature, just so I can see what this looks like. You know, the client hasn't opened it yet. My client gets this email that says, here's the proposal for the mansion construction. Here's the proposal. So we can customize the emails and everything like that that goes out as well. But basically, this is a way that my client can come in and say, you know, I'm Woody, the client. And when they sign it, it'll automatically switch the job to active. It'll send you an email notification letting you know you won the bid. And so you get a little bit more client communication. There's more of an air of professionalism coming off from your company. That's a big part of the contracting business, is just showing your client that, you know, you're a bit more tech savvy, you're a bit more professional, you do manage all of your contracts. Now, once this is active, we can actually start invoicing. But before I get too deep into that, I'm actually going to show you a little bit around our change order management and how we'll get to the point of invoicing these. Again, we like to have the actual feature for these items, so it's not, you know, going to feel like a workaround on the client's end. I'll plug in some last-minute AIA information that is required. You know, this is generally sent after the contract is approved. But I have my list of line items here that can actually be added to via change order, where I can say like upgraded electrical fixtures. And for what it's worth, you see that this add new item pops up. If this is something that I'm going to actually be tracking a lot, and I want to set it up as one of those two-way items in my QuickBooks database, I can actually add new. I can call it a service or a product. I'll call it a service here. I can write in my default price, write in a description of the item, put in all this information basically. So what we'll end up doing is pushing this to QuickBooks so you don't need to re-enter it there. Again, we like to sync everything up in two directions when we can. We'll put in the change order value, and we can actually send these out for an e-signature too. I won't go through that process again because it's identical to what you saw with the proposal. I'll just go ahead and make this active. But that's your way of being able to add to this contract value. So when it does come time to invoice, we'll go ahead and hit invoice now. But it will prompt me for just some basic AIA information. You know, the last day of the billing period, we're billing through the end of this week. And I can plug it in kind of the classic format where I say, you know, we're going to invoice the first 50% of the work we did on demolition, and we're holding on to $2,000 in materials. For painting, I still have $3,000 in materials. I've only started 10%. And for installation, we actually sent out an invoice for $4,000 just to purchase what we're going to need, but we haven't started the work yet. You can see the change orders in here as well, just so I can invoice that as well. All I have to do is just, you know, click here to get to 100%, or, you know, I won't leave anything in here yet. But what this will do when I finalize is it'll send this invoice to my QuickBooks account. It'll remove any amount that's being retained by the client. I can also email it right to the client just to kind of automate this process a little bit. And here's going to be that classic AIA form that we're generating. You know, it's in the same format. We have the cover sheet with all the amount that's being retained, the amount that's being requested, and more importantly, we'll actually create the continuation sheet with your schedule of values that you're invoicing the client for. We'll also do things like automate your application for payment number, and it's really just a big time saver. I mean, anyone who's ever had to make one of these in a Word or Excel document knows how hard it can be to get these onto one page, how to, you know, make the margins look correct, and, you know, we just like to save a lot of time, so you don't need to wrestle with anything to make this work. When we push an invoice to your QuickBooks account, we also set it up where the invoices can be synced in both directions as far as payments go. We have this transactions feed so I can see everything that's moved back and forth, and I can always just open this up and see the invoice that we created. It's just a little shortcut so you can see each item that you created in Knowify and where it ended up in QuickBooks. And so, like, you know, if I mark this payment as received, that's just part of how we like to you know, work with Knowify and our bidirectional sync. You know, back in my account here, I can click sync now and I'll be able to see the payment come back across. But while that's going to be syncing, I'm going to show you a little bit more about kind of how our actual versus estimated cost tracking works. So when I come to my plan and track section where I initially put up the budget, you can see there's a cost to date field, and it's broken down to materials, labor, and subs. That's going to be true for actually the whole project plan, so I can see it at each phase of the job. This is where our detailed job costing is really happening. So I can do things like come into my materials and say, like, we just used some items from my inventory. It was wire. We used this type of, that was a switch, but basically I could say, you know, we used 100 of these. And that's just a way to get kind of a manual adjustment into our material costs. But remember, I had a budgeted list of materials where I can actually say order materials, choose the items from my budget, and we'll actually generate a purchase order form for you. And so here's my vendor database. Again, we like to sync this stuff up with your QuickBooks account so you don't need to enter this in both softwares. But basically, I plug this in. We can email the purchase order right to the vendor if we need to. We also open up a PO number for the sake of reference. So when you receive a bill from the vendor, you can actually just go from purchases to bills. I can say add a new bill, and I can either plug in the name of the vendor, and it's going to say, well, here's everything that's outstanding with this vendor. Or we have the option to plug in the PO number, you know, 184, and it just shows me that, you know, it fills in everything that was on that PO. And we can actually use this as a way to log, you know, one bill against several POs, against several jobs. It's really however you want to manage it. And when I submit this, it'll send a bill to my QuickBooks account. Again, we sync the payments in both directions, so I could record payment in Knowify, write in the check number, and it'll close out in QuickBooks. But you also have the option of writing the check or recording payment in QuickBooks. It always comes back. It's just a way to make sure we can always automate this in either direction. And that's just how we'll track the material cost of the job. So if I open up that project again, I'm actually going to see this broken down into, you know, here is my cost to date versus the budget. Here's the material cost versus the budget. And I can see what specific phases of the job are costing me more or less than I budgeted. Looks like we're doing okay so far. But then we also get to expand each phase of the job into labor and materials. So if I wanted to track some of the labor cost of this, I can come to this labor, say enter time. We also have some scheduling features I won't get into too much detail on. But basically, this lets me see my list of employees. Each one has a loaded labor burden tied into them from our admin section. So I can come plug in hours for them, go ahead and submit these. And this is going to submit for review. So whoever's in charge of timesheets can say, like, okay, these all look good to me, approve. And this is the gateway between Knowify and QuickBooks. As soon as an entry is approved, it's actually going to push to my QuickBooks account. So let's see if I can use one of these as an option or as an example. I think Paul should actually have his account synced with QuickBooks, which means I can actually open up the weekly timesheet in my QuickBooks account, and I'll have all of those entries populated, and it'll break it down into what job each of them was on. Again, it's just a way for me to get a little bit more information on what everyone was doing. And that way we can sync up all of these hours with your QuickBooks account. Same goes for 1099 workers.
And Terrin, I just wanted to point out something there, that time flow, and hopefully I don't move you off your workflow, but that time flow, that can go to the payroll, but yet all along in Knowify, I can see all that labor burden, whether QBO cuts a paycheck or not, right? I mean, that's the beauty, I think, of this.
Yeah, and it happens upon checkout or upon entry, so it doesn't have to even be approved. It doesn't have to go through payroll or anything. We use the labor burden to say, well, maybe this hasn't been processed or posted or anything like that yet, but right now, based on the number of hours that everyone submitted, you've spent $1,064 on labor on this job. And I can see it narrowed down into what specific phase of the job I spent that money towards. And so that's just where we get this data updating in real time. So I don't need to go searching around. All I do is open up the project. I know exactly where I stand.
And can Knowify link to Expensify for other things, or?
Well, we only offer direct integration with QuickBooks Online and technically Zapier at this point in time. As far as linking with Expensify, HubDoc, ReceiptBank, Bill.com, since we have a bidirectional sync with your QuickBooks account, any expenses that get plugged into QuickBooks can be pulled into Knowify. And we actually have the option to set up every job as a sub-customer in QuickBooks. So just to show you a little bit more about the benefit of that, if you're using this sub-customer structure in QuickBooks, then I could say I have a new expense. I can plug in the information. I went to Home Depot, and we can for the sake of example pretend that we actually were doing this through Bill.com, ReceiptBank, whatever it is. But I can actually say that this is for Woody's mansion construction. Here's a hammer. Let's also do electrical. Here was wire. I spent $142.42. I'm going to code that to the job as well. And we could do several jobs with one expense or one bill if we need to. But when I save this, it's actually going to automatically be pulled into Knowify. So I'm going to say sync now. We have to trigger the sync if you're already logged into Knowify and you need to pull from QuickBooks. But whenever you log in, we technically hit this button for you. We'll actually be able to see the material cost of this job update. Just based off of these different items that were pulled in. So here's my wire, here's my hammer, and they were pulled in via QuickBooks. So if you're using Expensify or whatever other app that you're going to use to get your expenses, bills, payments, however it's going to work into your QuickBooks account, they'll be able to be coded into your Knowify jobs as well for the sake of job costing. So we like to play nicely with any kind of apps in the network. It's always going to have a way to manage to work with our Knowify jobs.
See, I love that integration going back. So in case someone just forgets to go into Knowify or whatever, or they only have access to QBO, you guys will pick up all that cost too and put it on the dashboard. So so nothing. I mean, not everything does a two-way sync, but you guys completely do, as well as even with the bank feeds. But sorry, I'll let you go on.
No, and I mean, we even have what we call the job costing hub. So if someone entered an expense in QuickBooks and didn't code it towards the job, we will still pull it in, but you can actually filter and say, show me everything that came in from QuickBooks and wasn't allocated to a job, and you have the option to kind of just pick and choose and say, like, oop, this was put on that job, but it actually should be on this job. And you can sort it all out in this job costing hub to get a little bit more organized here. So that's always an option too. The last thing I'll just show you is some of our reporting. This is kind of our classic report that we like to use as an example. It's the Advanced Jobs Report. It's from another account that I have, but this basically shows, the project name. If it's active, we also run reports on bidding, closed, and rejected jobs. But we show you in this Excel report the contract value, the amount invoiced, the work in progress revenue. That's all on the revenue side. We also show you the labor, material, subcontractor, and total cost to date versus your budget and how much is remaining in the budget. And through all these numbers, we can also give you your exact profitability right now, your percentage of profitability, your percentage of completion based off of actual versus estimated. And for what it's worth, we run reports on sales leads and project managers too, so we can, you can have incentive-based programs and everything like that. So we really have a lot of great tools for the sake of, job costing, actual versus estimated. We have our AIA features. And then a lot of what I didn't touch up on is that we have a lot of neat project management systems for the sake of scheduling and just a little bit more client communication for their contractor clients. And so there's a lot of stuff that they like to see in there too. That's kind of the basis of what I like to cover. Is there any questions? Can I show you anything else?
No, totally, and thanks for that, Terrin. That was great. And then just a couple takeaways, and I'll ask a few questions that came up. Again, I forgot to mention, obviously, QBO is not going to track WIP. Any kind of workaround would just be unbearable versus just seeing it right on the dashboard when you click into a job. So I love that piece of it and how quickly it creates things like work in process, tracking labor burden even before it goes to payroll and things you can see even before versus the budget. And then the profitability of the job in real time on the right, as well as I didn't know you guys can do all the purchasing from here. So literally, you could do everything from estimate, bid, and tracking everything here, and then in QBO you're just running financial reports and running payroll if that's where they have the payroll.
Yeah,
is that
absolutely.
true? I mean, are you invoicing out of here too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I did when I ran that AIA form, and the way basically our system was built to work for your clients, for their intents and purposes, they don't even really need to touch QuickBooks. We have QuickBooks set up for the accountants, for those users who are going to be still running reports. Obviously we don't keep a general ledger. We don't show total accounts receivable and payable. We don't run reports over the course of a quarter, over a year.
Right.
We're really meant to be a job management platform for the contractor, and so for the sake of the contractor, we're the main point of entry. It kind of makes us a little bit different from a lot of apps in the network. A lot of apps are kind of an add-on. We're a full system for the guys who are going to be using it, and then we give you guys the benefit of your contractor clients that don't need to be using QuickBooks anymore because 9 out of 10 times they're not going to be great at using their QuickBooks account, but they do know how to run their jobs, and that's what they can set up here. And we'll map it up so everything syncs to the correct accounts, to the correct, everything. We have the catalog items on a two-way sync, so that all works nicely on our end too.
And there's a mobile app too where I can take a picture of a receipt at Lowe's and make sure it gets included into the Woody's Mansion construction job?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can even have a reimbursement request run through Knowify as well. And we have different levels of approval authority, so people can actually give approval on anything submitted from the field. They get to see the receipt and all that stuff.
Yeah, I love that part of it because I know a lot of firms here will have desktop clients and that are contractors, and they know that that receipt isn't getting entered into desktop later on in the day or at night. So I like that mobility and real-time sending to the app itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really just a way that everything can happen in real time. You don't want to have to wait till the receipt makes it to the shoebox and then at the end of the month into your hands.
Awesome. And I have a few questions from the audience now that we have a little time left, Terrin, and thanks for the presentation. So if we already have items set up in QBO, so they have the products and services set up, are those imported into Knowify upon when you first sync?
Yeah, absolutely. The second you set up your Knowify account, the first thing we do is we ask you to plug in your QuickBooks info, and it'll pull in every client, vendor, and catalog item that you have. And catalog items, products and services.
And can you prevent those items from, prevent some items from coming in? This is a follow-up question.
We have no way to prevent any items from coming in.
Okay.
It's a full sync in either direction.
Okay.
Everything's run with the type ahead, so you can always search for the ones you need. You don't need to address the ones you don't.
Nice. Can you update the headings so that they're more industry specific? And I was thinking maybe the headings of the Excel report, or wait a minute. Maybe, Rachel, you can, probably not the Excel, because you could do that there, but I'm trying to think where the headings would have been to make them more industry specific. Headings within some of the windows. So.
The headings of the phases of the jobs, these are just based off of catalog items, and when you start an account, we can actually import a list of cost codes, which is very commonly used as catalog items or services in QuickBooks that we like to work with in Knowify as well. Okay,
cool. Yeah, she meant within Knowify just in general. So perfect. Awesome. Thanks for that. That answered it. And I think by accident I deleted one question. I'll get back to the user set up recurring expenses with a project. But there was another one Let's see here. Yeah, in Zapier, that has like a score of apps, right? Isn't that just like an app platform, Zapier itself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, what Zapier does, it eases the process of integrating two apps with one another. In general, you would have to build a custom connection of, Knowify to Gmail, Knowify to spreadsheets, QuickBooks to MailChimp. But what this does is it just creates a matching side of the integration for both softwares, so you can plug any two systems, obviously that makes sense, into each other. So if I want to set something up that says, it can be whenever I add a new friend on Instagram, you should add it as a client in my Knowify database, you can do that kind of stuff. They give you the options for it. So that's always an option as well.
Nice. All right, and a couple of last-minute questions here, and keep them coming, folks. How is the customer service with Knowify?
I feel like I'm not the right guy to answer the question since I run the customer
right.
So it's incredible. But we do free customer support. We do free training for everyone using Knowify, especially any of our partners that are advising. But that does extend out to any of your clients. We're very determined to make sure that everyone who uses Knowify, as the end user, is just as proficient in using it as we are on our customer support team. We'll set up screen share sessions, we build guides, we do customer support videos, all kinds of stuff. But it's really just whatever you need to do. And we also have an advisor program where we run webinars where you can tune in. I actually had one yesterday on how to manage subcontracts and 1099s in Knowify. And that's all part of our advisor network where we're trying to educate people on how to use Knowify, but also just some general information on construction advising and in general.
Awesome, and thanks for that, Terrin. Before I ask you about pricing and where they can go for that, there was a suggestion though that the website is heavily marketed towards construction, but it seems like when I was answering a previous question during your demo, nearly any industry that would need this type of visibility could use it. Their suggestion was just to maybe have a broader, brand of what you're going after on the Knowify website, because clearly there's stuff here that you don't necessarily need to be a contractor to take advantage of. So.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, just to give you a little bit of a lesson in Knowify history, we were actually built initially for, professional services and just general job costing. So, aside from construction, engineering firms, but then even outside that realm, accounting, legal practices, data management, really whatever you do, we wanted to have a job costing solution. We started building and marketing towards construction because that's where we had the most traction. We started doing well, and plus, if you ask David Leary about it, he'll always tell you, choose a niche and stick with it. And so that's kind of where we've been working. But we still actually have a fair number of companies that use Knowify that do maybe a auto body shop. We have companies that do maybe outside of contracting. They do real estate development, which is a little bit different. We have media companies come by pretty regularly, so there are other options. The reality is, if they're okay with seeing the little contractors logo in the top left corner of the screen, then yeah, we can absolutely find ways to work with them.
And then finally, Terrin, do you have just kind of go over pricing or maybe from the website? Just break it down.
Of course. Yeah, I can pull up the page. Basically, our pricing can either be paid yearly at an equivalent of $68 a month. That comes out to $816 a year, if I'm not mistaken. That gives you 2 Office users and 3 mobile users. Technically, Office can also log in on mobile, but it's saying you get 2 people who can do everything I showed you here, plus 3 guys that just are check-in, check-out type of guys. And then you can add additional Office at $15 per user per month. You can add additional mobile at $5 per user per month. That's plus our most popular package. You actually don't have to pay yearly. You can also pay monthly. It's $86 a month instead. It's a little bit more expensive if you don't sign a long-term contract, but it is an option. And then as advisors, we can actually either offer a revenue share of your clients that sign up through us, or we can offer you a custom discount code for the sake of wholesale billing. So if you have customers that you want to sign up, but 86 a month is too much for them, we'll generate a custom 20% off discount code so they get our yearly pricing for subscribing through you, even though they end up paying month to month. It's managed through your account. So basically, we do that so you don't have to buy a year's worth of subscription just to pass along the discount or just to wholesale bill them. You can actually pay monthly and get the discount that way and bill them what you want to for the Knowify services.
No, that's awesome. And thanks for showing this. And Terrin, I just wanted to thank you for coming on today and breaking down Knowify. I'm glad you had all this time because it was a really good deep dive into what the app does, and it spurned a bunch of questions. So
yeah,
it's really helpful for
absolutely.
firms that have service industry or contractor clients that obviously they saw what's not in QBO during my portion, and then where the gaps will be filled with Knowify. So Knowify.com. You can also, if you're in the client file, though, you guys don't see the apps on the left. If the client's in there and they click on apps, or you go to apps.com, just search for Knowify and it'll come up there. And it's top of the hour, so it's 2 o'clock Eastern. And I just wanted to thank Terrin, Kalian again, and thank you all for coming today. I will have the recording ready by end of day. And Terrin, thanks again. We'll go ahead and I'll leave it open for a couple minutes for any other questions, but I'm going to sign off in an audio fashion. And thanks again for your time today. Thanks again, Terrin.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Woody. It was a pleasure.